Well, howdy YouTube, Unkyjoe here, Unkyjoes Playhouse. Man, oh man, oh man. Today we're going to undertake something that I have had a lot of you ask for, and that is a soup to nuts install of a Windows Active Directory domain controller under Windows Server 2019. And there's a reason we're doing it. My company was contacted by this guy over here. That would be me, Unkyjoe. And for some reason, this guy, Unkyjoe, I guess he's some superstar on YouTube or something. That's what he told me anyway. He needs a Windows domain controller. He's got some 4 or 5 users in a work group. He wants to get a Synology NAS. He wants to use open source software for everything but his operating system. So we're going to see what we can do for him today. And the first part of that is getting him a domain controller set up. We could do all this through Synology, and we've done it before. But I know a lot of you have been clamoring for a soup to nuts Active Directory setup video, so we're going to do that today. So that's what this video is all about. So let me quit my yammering and let's get on with the video. Alright, so we're over on Dell 1 HV. This is the Dell R710 with the 6 hard drives in it. It's got the it's better if I just show you the task manager. It'll give you an idea what's in there, so I don't have to repeat myself. So this is our main gangbanger machine that's got the L5640 two L5640 CPUs, got 96 gig of RAM, and it's got a 10 gig Ethernet controller in there, is what we're using. Now, as far as storage goes for the virtual machines, we're using shared storage, iSCSI storage, off the Synology flash station, and that is the drive letter I here. So as you can see, I've got that connected up to the Synology flash station. Then I have a remainder of my C drive here, which I've partitioned into 2 different partitions, one for the operating system, and then what I've done is created an exports folder here. When you go to import a virtual machine from a non-Windows share, it's not going to work. The permissions are not correct because the version of Samba that runs on the Synology NAS is not completely compatible with Windows and its permissions. So I've got an export folder over on the Synology NAS, and this is where I keep an image of all my virtual machines so that I can just simply spool one up from import it, as you're about to see me do with the Unkyjoes Playhouse lab server. I'm just going to copy this Server 2019 sysprep over here to this exports folder, as I've already done, and this contains the virtual hard drive and the images and any snapshots I may have on that image. Now, that image was actually created back on 6/3 of 2019, so it's going to need some updates once we get it up and running, but I just wanted you to see how we're going to do this. So we're going to create a lab for Unkyjoes Playhouse, and in that lab, we're going to have an Active Directory domain controller, a DHCP server, a DNS server. We're going to be doing lots of stuff on there. We may spool up some virtual machines, but what we need to start with is the domain controller. That's also going to be on a separate subnet. My main subnet is the 5 subnet, but I've created a 30 subnet for a lab, and I have a 20 subnet for a lab. Today we're going to use the 30 subnet, and I'm going to show you how to do all that. I've already done videos on how to set up your VLANs in Unify, because I do have a complete and full Unify stack, and that makes setting up VLANs just totally easy. So go back and check out those videos if you need to set up, learn how to set up a VLAN. It's not as complicated as you may think. And then the P drive is actually my drive vendor pool of drives where I keep my video and music shares and that kind of thing. So the first thing we need to do is go into Hyper-V Manager, and we need to import that virtual machine. So I'm just going to simply come up here to import virtual machine. Little wizard will come up. tell it next. I'm going to browse to that exports folder. Let me show you what happens if I try to do it. First of all, you don't see the exports folder mapped here because, again, it doesn't have the right permissions. It's another reason why you have to copy it to a local hard drive. So I'm just going to go to exports and I'm going to select that Server 2019 SysPrep, select it. Now this image has been created back in June of last year and SysPrep so that it's ready to import and create a new virtual machine out of. So we'll just select that, go to next. Tells you what date it was created. Next. Very important you copy the virtual machine ID. That creates a new unique ID for the virtual machine. Click on next. Now by default I've got all my virtual machines saving to my iSCSI drive. So you'll see it's grayed out here, but if I wanted to change it, you'll see everything is going to the iDrive right now, which is the iSCSI. And I'm going to click next, and then the location of the virtual hard drive, that's going to be Hyper-V virtual hard disk. Next. And then it'll go out and tell you, hey, your network adapter is not connected. Which one do you want to use? I'm going to use the Gigabit 10 virtual network adapter. Click on next. Verify all of your settings are complete, and then click on finish. And then the wizard will start copying your machine over and creating a new VM. Hopefully. Yes, it will. So we'll come back when something changes. So that took actually less than 5 minutes, but we need to make some changes now to this virtual machine. So I'm just going to right click on it, choose my settings. So as you can see here, it's going to boot from a file because this is a type 2 Hyper-V. So we're going to come down here to memory, and I'm going to bump the memory up to 4 gig. And then the processor, it's going to have 2 virtual processors. That's fine. My hard drive is already set up there. We'll come back later and we'll change the name of the virtual hard drive file. I don't need ISO image of Windows Server 2019, so we'll disconnect that. And then our Gigabit 10 virtual network adapter is selected. However, we want this to be on its own VLAN, so I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to change this to VLAN 30. And then on the name, we're going to call it DC01 for Unkyjoes Playhouse. Get rid of this. Click on apply and OK. And let's go ahead and connect to it. And let's go ahead and fire it up and see what happens. Now, since this is a SysPrep image, it will take a few minutes for it to boot up, but it will eventually come up and ask us to go through the initial setup. So we'll come back when that occurs. Now, for those of you who want to know how much time this is taking in real time, you can just check down here when I cut the videos down here on the time. I'll keep the server time up there, so that'll give you an idea of how long the procedure took. So booting this initial virtual machine up took about 2 minutes to get where we are right now. So I'm going to go ahead and click on next, accept the license terms, and I need to give the administrator a super secret password. Click on finish. And you can see it's a rather quick machine to boot because we're running on all SSD shared storage thanks to Sasha over at Blue Telecoms in the UK. He's given us that flash station on loan, the FS1018, which I have a whole bank of SSD drives into. If I remember, I'll put a link to that video in here as well. Alright, now the first thing that's going to come up is Server Manager, because if you notice here, our little network icon is got a exclamation point. Now remember, we told this to be a member of the 30 VLAN 30. So we're going to have to manually go in and enter a IP address for our network card. So once we get Server Manager up here, you'll see it's being assigned by DHCP, but there is no DHCP address. So the first thing I'm going to do is rename this Ethernet adapter. We'll just call it GB10 for Gigabit 10. And then I'm going to right click it on and go to Properties. And we're going to assign it a 192.168.30.1 because it's the first machine on that network or on that subnet. Same way with our gateway. We'll assign it to 30.254. And then I'm just going to give it Google's DNS server. Well, that'll change later once we make it a domain controller. Let's click on OK, click on OK. And it'll go out and identify the network. And it just calls it network. So we'll tell it yes. So now if we refresh this screen, we can see we've got a 30.1 IP. Our little indicator has gone down here showing that we now have internet access. Now the next thing we need to do is change the time zone. So I just clicked on it there and I'm going to change that to Central Time. And OK. Refresh one more time. And then we'll see that we have a L5640 CPU, 4 gig of RAM, 126 gig hard drive. It's actually not that big. It'll grow as it needs the size. And I'm not going to change anything else right now because I'm going to close Server Manager. And we're going to test the internet by going out and going to Windows Update and getting this machine up to date, because it's been since June of last year, as you can see, 6/3 of 2019 at 10 o'clock at night since I last checked for updates. So I'm going to go ahead and check for updates. And so this will do a couple things. It'll get us up to date with our operating system, with our server operating system, and it'll go out and verify that we have internet connectivity, which is going to be important moving forward. And there you go. All right, so it's started the updates. It's 4:10 p.m. I will come back when all the updates are done. Now, the thing with updates is just keep doing them. If it tells you this update needs to be done and then you need to reboot, do it and reboot. Do it until all of the updates are done and it tells you no more are needed. Then you'll be done with your updates. So we'll come back when that changes. So once all the updates are completed, you'll see a screen similar to this. You're up to date. You can check it one last time. Let's see if Microsoft has sneaked anything else into Windows Server 2019. Windows Defender antivirus. So we'll let that update. Now the next thing I'm going to do after this, since I have everything set up and I have my base install done, I'm going to do a checkpoint or a snapshot, and that will allow me to then roll back to a different checkpoint if I need to. So keeping that in mind, I believe I can do the checkpoints while the machine is running. So I'm going to come up here to Action, do a checkpoint. Let's see, a checkpoint is now being taken. Type a name. If you do not want to use the default name, do you want to rename the checkpoint? We're going to call this All Updates Completed. Tell it yes. And now it'll say production checkpoint has been created. The running application state wasn't included in the checkpoint operation. You can configure checkpoint options under the virtual machine settings. So tell it OK. So now we should have a checkpoint created. Let's see. Yes, there it is right there. Right there. All updates completed. Cool. Now, let's see what kind of effect that has. Let's go to the settings. And now it is reverted to, now it's gone to the new checkpoint on the server. So it creates a new virtual hard drive as well once it does that. All right, so now we're ready to start installing Active Directory on here and making this a domain controller. So go grab a cup of coffee or your favorite adult beverage. We'll get started here in just a second. So we're going to set up Active Directory on here, and that entails setting up DNS, DHCP, Active Directory, domain controller, etc. And the easiest way to do that is through Server Manager. You could do a DC promo command, but I prefer the GUI, so we'll just come down here to the Start menu, go to Server Manager. And remember, this is on the 30 subnet. You'll see that here. So it's isolated from my production subnet, which is 5, and from my other lab subnet, which is 20. So this will be on its own. So the first thing I want to do is rename this server. And we'll call this DC01-UJP. Tell it OK. Now, every time we do this, change the name or do anything like this, Microsoft wants us to restart. But I'm going to let you see how quick the virtual machine is, restarting even. It does not take a long amount of time, and that's one of the benefits of using fast shared SSD storage through an iSCSI share. As you see, it took literally no time at all to reboot. Go ahead and log back in, and then we're going to relaunch Server Manager again, and then we'll start the Active Directory install. So we'll go Start, go to Server Manager. And you can see our new computer name is up there, DC01 for Unkyjoes Playhouse. Our time zone is right. We've got our IP address in here. We've got enough RAM. We've got enough hard drive space. So let's go up here to Manage. And we're going to add roles and features. And the wizard will come up. Click on Next. We're going to do a role-based or feature-based installation. Next. We're going to select this server, DC01-UJP. And what we're going to do is Active Directory Domain Services. That's the second option there. And I just chose Add Features. So if I click it again, click Next. Click Next. All right, now it's going to warn you you could use Azure if you wanted to. And that's basically Microsoft's online version of Active Directory. We're not going to be using that today. And we're going to let it install all these roles, which it will do. And then once it's installed the roles, it will then allow us to remote this to a domain controller. So we'll let this run, and I'll come back when something changes. All right, so as you can see, our installation was successful. So we can close the wizard. Now, the next thing we want to do, we got a yellow exclamation point up here, so we're going to click on that. And the next thing we want to do is our post-deployment configuration. So we want to promote this server to a domain controller. So I'm going to click on that. And what we're going to do is add a new forest. And I'm going to keep this domain name short. So we're just going to use ujp.local for Unkyjoes Playhouse. I could do the whole thing, unkyjoesplayhouse.local or unkyjoesplayhouse.com, but I like to keep my internal domain name as short as possible. Just, it's a preference of mine. So I'm going to click on Next. And our forest functional level is going to be Windows Server 2016. Our domain functional level is going to be Windows Server 2016. It's going to install DNS, Global Catalog Server. Now I need to give it a super secret password. This is the password you'll use if you were to foobar your Active Directory and you need to restore, use the Directory Services Restore mode. Evidently my passwords are not the same here. Get them to match. Alrighty, there we go. Click on Next. Now, don't worry about the DNS delegation. It'll be taken care of later. It can't do the delegation because it can't find the authoritative parent zone. Now, the NetBIOS name is going to be your Active Directory domain name, the ujp.local, without the local at the end. That's just how NetBIOS used it. So it'll still be UJP. So click on Next. Just accept the default for your paths. This is for the database, log files, and the sys volume. And then one of the nice things, if you're a command line junkie or a Linux freak, they do have PowerShell within Server 2016, Server 2019, Server 2008. So you can actually view the script here. This is what's going to run at the command line level. So if you want to run that command or save this and modify it, put some variables in there so you don't have to run the wizard, you have that ability using PowerShell. I'm just going to keep on with the wizard and click on Next. Now it's going to go out and verify the prerequisites for the domain controller. And as long as you get a green arrow here, or a green check here, don't worry about these. You can click on these links if you want to, but I wouldn't be worried about them. They'll be corrected after we get Active Directory installed. So now I'm just going to click on Install. And again, this will take a little bit of time, so we'll let it run, and we'll come back when something changes. So as part of the process, once it gets installed, it's going to reboot the server. So you will see a message that you're about to be signed out of the domain control or of the machine. It'll reboot, and then once it reboots, we should be able to log into the new domain we created. And then we'll need to go out and do a little bit of housekeeping. So I want you to see this. Now the first time it boots up after installing Active Directory, it's going to be a little bit slower because it's now got a database it's got to maintain and a bunch of other services have to be run. So just be aware that it's not locked up. It's just doing its stuff in the background. Alright, so we should be able to log on now. And as you can see, we are on the domain. We have some problems with our network card, namely internet access. We'll fix that here shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and log on to the new domain we created now. And one of the things you'll notice is once we've activated the domain controller, we'll get a different desktop. We'll have to set that up all over again. Actually, Server Manager should come up here. And it looks like the server realized it can get out to the internet now. Now, Server Manager, I believe, will come up here shortly. No, maybe not. Well, we'll bring it up on it. We'll bring it up manually then. So we should now see our work group is ujp.local. We should be, remember I was telling you a few episodes ago about what can happen. Sometimes it'll come up and not realize it's on a domain. And it's because of the sequence of items that start up. Especially if you're running an internal DNS server, which I believe we are now. We should have DNS enabled. So let's go out. The next thing I want to do is go out and look at our network settings and make sure that this has changed it to use our local DNS or loopback address instead of Google's DNS servers. And it has. So it's looping back for DNS, so it should look at itself for DNS. Now, what I sometimes can do is come in here to Services. I believe it's Network Location Awareness or Network List Services. If you restart this, actually it's the network Location Awareness I want to restart, and that'll restart the Network List Services. Now usually if you do this, that will fix the problem. Yeah, so now you see it says ujp.local, even though it says no internet access. Ignore that. This is that little bug that's in Windows that if it continues to do this, and now you notice the Windows Defender firewall for domains is on, and it sees this on a domain. Let's go out and check our internet access, make sure we have a gateway, and we do. DNS don't worry about, and that may be why we're getting that error. Now the other thing I'm going to do is turn Internet Explorer Enhanced Security Configuration off for administrators. That way that little thing doesn't pop up and bug me. And let's just go out and see if we have internet access here. We should. Yeah, it looks like it's getting out to the internet. So that's good. Okay. So that's working. Alright, so now what I want to do is a little bit of housekeeping. I've already RDP'd into this server at 30.1. You can do the same. But we're going to do a little housekeeping. I want to put some icons on the desktop, that kind of thing. So I'm going to put Active Directory users and computers over here. We're going to drag Server Manager over here. We're going to drag DNS. And let's see here. That should be good for now. We'll go ahead and grab iSCSI initiator as well, just in case. Now the one thing we don't have on here is DHCP. So I prefer to use Microsoft DHCP server on my local networks. Either that or I use the DHCP server built into pfSense, but since we don't specifically have a pfSense firewall up and running for this network, we're using the Unify Security Gateway, so we'll just make do with what we have. But we're going to need to install DHCP and configure it. So we need to open Server Manager here. And then let's come over here to manage. We're going to add, it's a role or feature, so we're going to choose add roles and features. Click on next. It's a role-based or feature-based install. Click on next. Make sure our name for our server and our IP address are correct, and they are. Click on next. And then right down, let's see, where is it? Actually right there. Looking right at it, Joe. So once I select it, it's going to install some additional tools. So I'll go ahead and add the features. Click on next. Click on next. And it's warning you, you should have at least one static IP address on the computer. And then make sure you plan your subnets, scopes, and exclusions. Store the plan in a safe place for later reference. Yada yada. Click on next, and then click on install. Now this should not require a reboot. Okay, so it looks like the install is done now, so we should be able to click on close. Now we've got a little yellow exclamation point up here, a notification that we need to complete our DHCP configuration. We should just be able to click on that. And then what we'll need to do is authorize an administrator for the DHCP server. So I'm going to click on next. I'm going to use the following credentials: Unkyjoes Playhouse administrator, and commit, and then close. Now, you would think, right, that all you have to do is come over here to DHCP to modify it, but that's not true. These are just the performance counters, services, and events. So you actually have to load the Active Directory component. That's why Server Manager is kind of worthless on Windows Server. They have a new way to manage the servers. It's much more effective. It's web-based. So we're just going to close that for now, and then we're going to come down here back to Windows Administrative Tools, and then we should see the DHCP icon here. So now we can drag that onto the desktop and drop it, and then double click on it, And then let's expand this out so I can see it and you can see it. And you'll see right now what you're looking for is to make sure that both your IPv4 and IPv6 are green. If they're not, you haven't authorized your server. So I'm going to come here to the IPv4 and I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to do a new scope. And I'm going to, a wizard will pop up. I'm going to click next and I'm just going to call it UJP-1. You can call it anything you want. This doesn't matter. It's just a descriptor. Put anything in there you want. Click on next. Now I like to start my IPs. I like to reserve 1 through 25 for servers, or I'm sorry, 1 through 29 for servers. So I always start my IP addresses at 30. So we'll start this one at 30, and then depending on how many devices or workstations you think you might have, I'm going to go ahead and set this to let's go to 150. And then the subnet mask here is 285.285.285.0. Click on next. I'm not going to add any exclusions. Next. I'm going to set the lease time to 8 days, whatever the default is. Click on next. Now it's asking me, do I want to set up my DNS and gateways and all that? Yes, I do. So I want to configure these options now. Click on next. All right, so our default gateway is 192.168.30.254. That's the IP address of our router out to the internet. Next. It already sees that we're on Unkyjoes and it already has our DNS server in there at 30.1. If I wanted to add additional DNS servers like Google's, I could do that here. I'm not going to go into that right now. I'm just going to leave the setup the way it is right now. We'll click on next. We don't have a Win server, so we don't need to worry about that. Click on next. And do I want to activate this scope now? Yes. We'll click on next and then finish. And so now you'll see that our scope is now active. And we can click on that, and if we had any machines out there getting an IP address, we would see the address leases. And there's our address pool. So there you go, YouTube. We got Unkyjoe, his domain controller set up, and I guess the next thing we'll have to get set up for him is some workstations and get him logging into that domain controller. So be on the lookout for those videos coming up. And then after that, we'll show you how we get the Synology apps working under Windows, how we get his email up and running. All that kind of stuff is coming up. So thank you, Unkyjoe, for contracting with my company and giving us this opportunity to get you set up. I understand you're going to be doing video editing and some photography work and audio editing and all that, and I'm glad you're allowing us to be a part of it. So there you go, YouTube. We hope you found the video entertaining and informative, if not a little goofy. Leave your comments down in the comment section. Please give us a thumbs up if you like the video. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. It's very important that you subscribe and click the notification bell. That way, hopefully Google will notify you when we have new videos. Keep in mind, all of our content is mirrored over on Library. So look in the show notes or the description down below for a link to that, and it's in our About section. Donate if you're so inclined. We accept PayPal, Patreon, good old checks and cash. Don't send cash in the mail. Any way you want to donate, if you want to send us some product, but please let us know ahead of time before you just randomly send stuff to us. We don't want to become a dumping ground for old tech. So please come back and see us again, and don't forget, we'll see you on the other side.